There are big imbalances in the UK economy, and most of those imbalances are regional, and we need to hear the voices of the left behind places to try and rebalance the economy. I'm Professor Phil Tomlinson, and I'm a Professor of Industrial Strategy and Deputy Director of the Centre for Governance, Regulation and Industrial Strategy. What is industrial strategy? Well, both industrial strategy and its counterpart, industrial policy, relate to the idea that the government should play a proactive role in a market economy, and this policy intervention is geared towards enhancing the competitiveness of a country's firms, its industries, and perhaps its regions and places. Industrial policies themselves are many and varied. They can include, for example, policies related to trade, science and technology, public procurement, or even subsidies and tax breaks for firms and industries. The term industrial strategy is a modern term and implies an overarching coordinated policy framework. In essence, an industrial strategy is a coordinated set of industrial policy measures. For many years, industrial policy has had somewhat of a bad press in the UK. This was largely because in the 1970s, the government was accused of bailing out failing firms or lame duck industries, such as British Aerospace and Rolls-Royce. Ironically, those companies went on to become British success stories. However, most advanced economies have historically developed through the state having an industrial strategy of some form. For instance, it is well documented that the UK, the world's first industrial nation, introduced import tariffs on Indian textiles to support the development of its own fledgling textile industry. And across Europe, Germany, for instance, is famed for taking a long-term view of industry and actively intervening to support its manufacturing base. So why is industrial strategy important right now? Well, after the 2016 Brexit referendum, there were concerns about the UK's so-called left behind places, or lagging regions, and the widening regional inequalities in the country. These regional inequalities are long-standing and are actually wider in the UK than anywhere else in the advanced industrial world. So there was a bit of a policy reset in central government, and it became fashionable again to talk about industrial strategy. There was an emphasis upon reviving lagging regions and reviving places. Of course, this generated some excitement around my research area, which is place-based industrial strategy. This is an idea from economic geography and regional studies that policy should not be a one-size-fits-all approach, but instead should be tailored to the characteristics and needs of particular regions. Now, there are several local industrial strategies published across the country. There's no official funding attached to these local industrial strategies, but they were an opportunity to map out the local strengths and capabilities of the region and identify suitable policy interventions to promote growth. And while the term industrial strategy seems to have been abandoned and is no longer used so much in government, it's clear that many of the policy ideas and initiatives that we talked about a few years ago are likely to be important in the levelling up agenda. It's also going to be important that levelling up is not going to become just another in a long line of empty slogans about regional development. And in this regard, we should note that levelling up is not easy to do. UK's regional inequalities, the north-south divide, goes back to at least the 1850s. And previous governments, including the last Labour government, have tried to address these regional imbalances, but with only limited success. And we also need to be realistic about what levelling up can actually achieve. Is it realistic, for example, to think that places like Cornwall and some of those poorer northern towns and cities are going to be able to become as dynamic and as prosperous as Cambridgeshire and the South East? We need industrial policies that address the challenges posed by climate change and the green transition. And we also need to encourage the take-up and widespread adoption of the new technologies that are associated with the fourth industrial revolution, technologies such as robotics, digital and artificial intelligence. And we also need a long-term skills policy that is going to equip people through various stages of their lives to deal with these structural and transformational changes that are occurring in the economy. The trick or the difficulty will be trying to align national policy goals with the regional policies in tackling these issues. I think with a lot of the crises that are occurring at the moment, the fuel crisis, the shortages, they reflect really a lack of resilience in the UK economy. We've relied too long on outsourcing and the low-cost solution. So we do really need to think about building back some resilience and some capacity in the system. So very much so, industrial strategy can play a part for that, because think about gas, for instance. We have we're reliant on gas to generate electricity. We have very low levels of gas storage in the UK, and there may be a role there for the state to take a more proactive line, because we have a lack of, we across the board we've lacked capacity, we lack resilience for so long. We need to rethink. Getting local stakeholders involved in the process is going to be critical, because they know where the problems are, they know where the challenges are, they're best placed to try and tackle them. Yeah, they might need outside help, but they're the ones to make the best decisions for themselves, for their future. And too often in the UK, and particularly in England, we allow Whitehall knows best. Really, if you want local growth, the local industrial strategies were a nice starting place, because it allowed local stakeholders working with local universities and local business leaders and other stakeholders. It allowed them to try and say, well, these are our strengths, these are our weaknesses, these are our challenges. Where can we identify what our best opportunities are? I grew up in Stoke-on-Trent, which during the 1980s and 1990s suffered quite rapid and devastating deindustrialisation and social economic decline. Since then, I've had a long interest and indeed a passion for exploring how government, through industrial strategy and industrial policy, and in partnership with industry, can play a proactive role in promoting regional economic growth. Much of my research, with colleagues here at Bath and elsewhere, has focused on lagging regions and the role of place-based industrial strategy in their revival. So, for example, returning to Stoke-on-Trent, we've done quite a bit of work on the recent revival of the city's famous ceramics industry. We've documented and examined empirically the role of industry institutions, trade associations, the role of firms and other bodies in the city and in the sector's transition into new technological domains, in particular into material science.